we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about the geologic time today, and then we're going to do a lab activity dealing with geologic time. So geologic time, we talked about in class yesterday. That is measuring the ages of things in the geologic record. That is in the dirt that we see. And I talked about the background, the difference in a young Earth creationist point of view and a uniformitarian naturalistic point of view. The one thing we didn't talk about was the specific time frames. So I actually just copied and pasted directly from the textbook this stuff here. And so I have the textbook's dates, which you will see are slightly different than dates you find elsewhere. But going through these historical time periods, these are the things that you actually should know for the test. Somebody asked, what should we know? So you should have in your test bank, in your head, the Precambrian time is from, and here it says 4.5 billion years ago, or 4,500 million years ago. Remember, you had 4.3 million years ago on the slide yesterday. And I talked about different people give you different numbers for that. So, nobody's going to argue if you say 5 billion years ago versus 4.3 billion years ago. At least not, I say nobody, I mean me. That's not going to be something you're going to have to differentiate on the test. We have the oldest was the Hadean. Remember we talked about that, like Hades, it's like hell. Hot, molten. It's an era with volcanism and meteorites, no oceans. Very toxic atmosphere. Volcanism.
Is that the religion of Vulcans?
Okay, now you're just making fun. That is exactly what Spock worship. No, vulcanization is, well, oh boy. As long as we have fun. This is the place to be then. Okay, then we had the Archean. Remember I said archaic is our root word there. During this period, you have the Earth's surface cooled, and you start having condensed water vapor. Then the Proterozoic is when you have the first prototypes of life. So the Proterozoic, well, it's not quite Proterozoic is the first prototypes of life, the first single-celled living organisms. And then you get to the Paleozoic era. So we've gone from a time to an era. And paleo means old. So the Paleozoic is old. The Mesozoic is middle, and the Cenozoic is recent. So Paleozoic, 543 million years ago is what our textbook says, to 248 million years ago, when you have the first signs of life. And so it's broken down to Cambrian, and you don't have to know the 543 to 490, right? Don't worry about memorizing these numbers in the different periods. But the Cambrian period, it's interesting if you look at these, it was a warm environment, much warmer than we have today. And almost all major life forms were marine organizations. That should be a foreshadowing for today's lab. In fact, I put it down twice. It was so important. I'm a little embarrassed about that now that I look at it. But one of them says almost all major forms of marine organisms appear then. So almost all major forms. Now that doesn't mean that we had crawfish and big mouth bass and that kind of thing. But that we had different types of marine organisms that we have today. Next comes the Ordovician, where we went from very, very hot environment, much hotter than today, to a very cold environment. And that's when we have our supercontinent of Gondwana. Now, I looked at other sources, and other sources just say Gondwana. And so later on, you'll see I morphed from Gondwana to Gondwana. But our textbook says Gondwana. And you have, during the Ordovician, the first vertebrates and jawless fish. I don't know much about fish, so I don't know the difference in a jawed and a jawless fish. Embarrassing to say. Then the Silurian warms back up. You still have Gondwana. You have your first fossilized plants and land animals. Yay, scorpions, millipedes. Aren't you happy? Then Devonian, it's a warm, moist climate. And you have a new supercontinent, Laurasia. along with Gondwana land. So you have two supercontinents at the same time. And that's the age of fishes. So Devonian, to me, of course, I think of Devo like the band. We are Devo. And if you know anything about Devo, you know that Devo actually stands for something pertinent to this class. Nobody knows? It stands for de-evolution. That's their band. My brain went to another song of theirs, but I at least didn't sing it. Then the Carboniferous, remember that's got lots of coal deposits. The Carboniferous was kind of a swampy era. And you have Laurasia and Gondwana land merged to form Pangaea. So now we have the supercontinent that everybody talks about, the Carboniferous. Has Pangaea in it. And lots of insects. Good time to be alive. And the first amniotes. Amniotes are things that, okay, I don't even remember what it is. It has to do with eggs, and mammals and reptiles are both forms of amniotes. At first I wrote the first mammals and reptiles, and then I realized, wait, no, that's not right. Then the Permian period, where you still have Pangaea, but it's compressing, and you're starting to build mountains, like the Rocky Mountains were built during the Permian period. And this is huge. 96% of all marine species died at the end of the Permian period. And 70% of all land species. That's a major extinction. That's the biggest extinction event in recorded, that is fossil record recorded, history. How do we know we have these mass extinctions? I mean, I'm just throwing out facts, right? How do you know they're facts? You don't. How would a scientist come to the conclusion that 96%, and I know you don't know, you can't go out and explore all of this and gather the data yourself. How would a scientist know that 96% of all marine species died there?
I think they're looking at, they look at fossil records, and then right above it, they see a lot less on the next layer.
Yeah, all they have to go with is what's in the fossils. And so you have all of these different species. Let's say you had 100 species in the ocean. And then the layer above, you only see 4 of those. And so they're like, wow, the rest of them must have died. You also have another thing that occurs. You have death place. You have regions where you have just enormous numbers of fossils. And that tells you there was a lot of death in a short amount of time. And so those are two things that can be used to come to this. Yeah, the flood. The flood would produce enormous mass extinction, right? Except for it wouldn't be a full extinction because you had the species from each kind, as the Bible says. What would kind be, by the way?
The different groups, like mammal,
That's a good question.
like species?
We don't know.
Okay. So we have two different answers here. None of them being the one that is completely impossible. The completely impossible is every different variation that exists today was on the ark. So you had, for instance,
That'd be a lot. That would be
it would be way too many. You would have all of the different kinds of dogs that exist and all of the different kinds of cats. Most people take it to mean what Grace said multiple times, that kind means species. So you had a feline representative. And all the felines we have today, how do we get this wide variety of felines today?
Mutations.
From mutations, from evolution. Right? Most, not all, mind you, but most Christian scientists believe in a variation that occurs over time. And we can see those kinds of variations. There are squirrels that were separated by the Grand Canyon that are genetically the same squirrels, but they're different colors on one side of the Grand Canyon than the other. A genetic mutation that made them drift. And so we have that kind of variation leads us to having panthers, bobcats.
Charlie.
I'm trying to think of the most annoying cat. Meow. Siamese cat.
So I mean, my
Cats when I was a kid. What was that? Are they?
Those are hairless.
And they're hairless. But Dr. Not Dr. No. It's the one that's a joke on Dr. No. Dr. Evil has. Right? I think he does. Dr. Evil from I can't remember anything.
from Bolt.
That's what I was thinking.
I don't even know what Bolt is. I'm thinking the one with Mike Myers, the spoof on James Bond. Or not on, yeah, James Bond.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, anyway, let's move on and not do this. Here's something else that happened at the end of the Permian period. You have the breakup of Pangaea. So we had Laurasia and Gondwana that got together and made mountains, and now they broke up. And they separate, and Gondwana land moves on to become Africa. And Laurasia goes on to become, I think it's just South America, but it might have had other parts with it as well. So we have the breakup of that supercontinent. Yes, I have South America. I said South America, not South Africa, right?
Yes.
Because that would have been really dumb to say Africa and South Africa. So the Mesozoic era, the middle one, from 252 million years ago to 65 million years ago, that's the age of the reptile. And what's your reptile? Age of the reptile means dinosaurs, yes. So that's the period that is dominated by dinosaurs.
Would that also be the Jurassic period too?
The Jurassic period is within the Mesozoic, yes.
Oh, okay, I get that. I see that now.
What, a lot of dinosaurs were birds, though, weren't they?
Yes. I mean, when you say birds,
I'm talking
age,
feathers.
not feathered.
A lot of them.
There, as I understand things, there has been great turmoil with people saying dinosaurs have feathers and others. No, they couldn't. Reptiles don't have feathers. Birds have feathers, and these were reptiles.
Do we
So-
really know what they have? I can't really see it.
I don't know about preservation of feathers. I think that feathers can be preserved in fossils, or at least the pattern of the feathers. The feathers themselves won't be, but the patterns, the remnants. I couldn't tell you exactly where we are. We have the Archaeopteryx, which is considered a transitional fossil between a reptile and a bird.
How did? Okay, so what animals do we have before the Mesozoic period?
Before the Mesozoic, it was primarily, but not exclusively, things that lived in the water. You have the development. Remember, we talked about insects in the Permian, or not Permian, the Carboniferous, and we talked about the first amniotes and millipedes and scorpions that lived on land. So we had those kinds of things going on before the Mesozoic.
So how can you go from creatures like that to directly after that creatures like the Plesiosaurus,
Which is huge.
huge and eats plants and walks on birds? How can you
Honestly, I can't answer that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we do know that animal sizes have varied over time. You can find
I mean, I can understand like micro evolution and different species, but that just seems like a whole different animal altogether.
Yes, it does. It does, and I don't have an answer. I would love to be that omniscient one, but it's not. And so, yeah, I just can't answer that question because I am ignorant. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Don't take that quote out of context. Yes, my teacher's completely ignorant. Look, here are his own words. So in the Mesozoic, you have the first one is the Triassic period, which is ruled by reptiles, but it also has the earliest mammals emerging. So just like what I was talking with Bryson, what kind of animals did you have in the Paleozoic? Mostly fish. But you had a few of these other things that were growing and developing. And I know I sound like an evolutionist here. This is just looking at the fossil records and what we see in the fossil records. Saying developing is putting an interpretation on the fossil record. In the Mesozoic, most of the fossils in the Triassic are reptiles, but they're not the only ones. You have some mammals. The Jurassic period, ruled by dinosaurs, but you have your first birds appearing. And then the Cretaceous, the Cretaceous period, the end of the Mesozoic, you have the emergence of mammals. They don't rule yet, but they're emerging. And then you have another great extinction. I always learned this as the KT boundary. I was looking and saw it being called the KPG boundary today when I was preparing for class. But you have another extinction event with 60% of all animal species wiped out. So it's changing again what's going to dominate. It was dominated by dinosaurs. Now you have 6% of the species die out, including with it all of the dinosaurs. And what comes out to be the leader is the mammals. And that's where we are today, is in the Cenozoic, where we have mammals. And so humans appear in the fossil layers only relatively recently. So most of the Cenozoic, the first 65 million years or so, has no Homo species in it. But then you have the Homo erectus, Homo this. We are Homo sapiens sapiens appearing at the very, very end. Now, what would cause these extinction events? What would make an enormous number of species all die at once?
Climate change.
Climate change. Natural disasters. Now, all three of those answers are tied together into the answer. We start with this second one. We have we believe a good understanding of why. That an asteroid struck the Earth down there in the Yucatan Peninsula and created this enormous crater. And I was saying, I don't think it was in this class I was saying like 20 kilometers across, right? Because it's not. It's like 100 kilometers in diameter. That's an enormous crater. And it created enormous clouds of dust from the impact, right? Stuff that was thrown up into the sky, covers the Earth. And so what's that going to do? Well, you're going to instantly have a cooling effect because you're stopping sunlight from getting through. And it's going to change the concentration of gases in the air. You know what?
Prepare for the Ice Age.
Yeah.
Ice Age, right?
Yes. I think it did throw us into ice ages because we have, the current era actually is an era of ice ages. But so the temperatures change, the atmosphere changes. Animals that are not adapted well for varying climates can't survive. And so that's the leading explanation for what caused this. It's not the only explanation. I know I was up at a museum in Canada, and they had an exhibit about the extinction here, and they said that there's actually signs that the extinction started before the meteor impact occurred. How do they know when the meteor impact occurred? Because all of that dust was up in the air, and that dust then settles down to the ground, and so you have the same layer all around the Earth that contains shocked iridium, which could only have come from the asteroid impact. And so they know from the layers that it occurred in this layer, and the extinction was occurring there, but apparently there's some evidence that it started before that layer. So that is the material that I did not get covered in class yesterday. Yes, Hosanna.
So how do they explain the dinosaur, say dinosaurs dying immediately, in the middle of fighting? Because they have found fossils like dinosaurs in layers where they're in the motions of fighting and they immediately were covered up.
The only explanation that can be given for something happening that quickly is that you have a catastrophic event like, say so you have the asteroid impact, going with that. You have the asteroid impact, and if you have it causing a landslide or causing if you're close enough that you're just completely buried in the debris in a matter of minutes, that could explain. And if this is happening on the opposite side of the Earth from Mexico, then you're not going to have that quick of a deposition. But you would have a shock wave going through the Earth, so you could be causing a landslide on the opposite side of the Earth. Because it's a very valid question. Look, I'm collecting mirror sticks. So let us look. By the way, for Hannah's sake, this is my review for exam 3 here that I was lecturing from. Well, what I was lecturing from.
Oh, okay.
It is long though, and I'm not quite done. I still got to do the chapter I'm lecturing on. Yeah.
I think we're asking the same question. Do we need a PTQ?
Yeah.
No, let's just not do it.
Probably, yeah.
Okay, so looking at the lab today, our lab today is going to simulate what a geologist does in labeling the different layers. So this activity is consistent with young Earth creationist views because we're not dealing with absolute dates. Everything is relative dating. We're going to determine what's older and what's newer. So we start off by recognizing that outcrops are places where we see the layers of rock. So where I see these usually is when I'm driving through the mountains and the road's been cut through and you have an outcrop where you can see different layers. And so here we have an example of 3 different outcrops. And what the geologist does is tries to say, okay, which layers from this outcrop match layers from this outcrop and match layers from this outcrop. And so you can see lines are drawn here. And so went from the top, I used this so I could make a ruler and make straight lines. From the top to the top, and from the bottom to the bottom. Now I only have 6 up here, but I have more of these. I want you to actually use a straight edge to draw your lines. I don't want squiggly lines that are hard to follow. I want straight lines that are easy to follow. And so what you're going to do is do that with this diagram here. So let's start off. I have M is the bottom one here. M appears in the next one, but it's not at the bottom. So I'm going to draw a line from the bottom of M to the bottom of M, and from the top of M to the top of M. Now the next one here is L, and there's no L in the second outcrop. Next is D, there's no D in that outcrop. Next is Z, there's no Z in that outcrop. But I have X, so I can do the X's here. So there I've drawn all of the lines that I can that are exactly correct between the first outcrop and the second outcrop. And then I'll go to the next outcrop. And so I'll start at the bottom again. Hey, look, I have S and S. So how should I draw a line with S and S from blank to blank? Okay, straight across from bottom to bottom, and then from top to top. So there's bottom to bottom. There's top to top. And then I have M, so I've already done bottom to bottom on M, so I'll go top to top on M. C, no C. B, there's a B. So I go from bottom to bottom and top to top. Now this first pass, I'm only doing since I see people drawing, do you need straight edges? Because remember, I want these with straight edges, not freehand. Anyone?
Are these okay? Those just-
Yeah, paper's okay.
Oh, wait,
Okay, now I'm going to continue on to the last one because we have more things that we learned from this last one. So down at the bottom, S to S, top of S to top of S, bottom of L to bottom of L, and now you have something interesting that we didn't have yet. What do I have when I go bottom of L to bottom of L to bottom of L? A triangle. What does that indicate?
A missing layer.
That layer M must go between S and L. Now, it's not the only thing necessarily that goes between there, but it has to go between there. So now I'll do the top of L to the top of L. And then there is no Z, C, or D, so we just go up to the B's. And so now I've done all of the ones that didn't require any thought. Now I've got to start thinking.
Do you want us doing this in different colors?
You don't have to in different colors. I'm doing different colors just to make it clear what I'm doing. So now I'm going to look and say, okay, what other things can I pick out? I have C is above L here in the region 4. And so since C is above L, then I must have the bottom of C has to go above L, right? Right here. Okay, so that's, I swear so that tool is not what I thought it was. Don't think this one does. Nope, that doesn't do it. I swear there was a pointer tool, but anyway, I'm going to.
No, that's from L to L.
Yeah, that's from the top of L to the top of L. You're talking about this line right here?
The other one, the blue one.
Okay, yeah, that's the one I just drew. Because we look over here and we see that C is above L. Since I have L here, C has to go above it.
But there's not.
And likewise, since C is above L and below D, I must have it go like this. And then we have Z is above D and D is above C. So we're going to have this. Whoops, that didn't quite go right. We have Z is below B. Right. From the third column, you see Z is below B. And so you're going to go like this. Z is below B by going like this. And as we said, D is also below B. So the top of B has to be below B. And then D is above C. So the bottom of D is above, well, I'm going to stop here because
You're not giving us time to draw.
well,
Because he's gonna make us do
because yes, you're supposed to do this. I'm not supposed to be doing it for you. I know I've done 3/4 of it actually, more than that probably. But you look and see which ones are above which. to get this together. And so what we can see here is C should be inserted between L and D according to this. D and Z should be inserted between C and B. And so from this, we then can put together the complete layers. And so make sure you continue that on. Actually,
Do you want those arrows in there?
I came very close to doing the whole thing. There's only like 2 or 3 more lines. No, there's only like 2 or 3 more lines to draw. I went far overboard on what I anticipated doing here. But it's not because, no, because you're learning. Learning is key.
But I'm learning right now.
Good, then you can finish them off.
I'm learning when you help us.
Not really.
I'm a visual person.
Well,
I really am. I'm not lying.
then I'm glad that I helped you here.
So can you help with the last 3?
No,
You guys don't think it's good.
because then it wouldn't, then we'd have no evidence that you actually learned it. Right? We'd have no evidence that you were able to do it.
Okay, but can you like zoom out of the picture?
I will. So when you have it all done, you have this sheet that I will give you right now that I want you to summarize your results on. And so this has, in the second column, the layers. Fill that one in first. After you've got all your lines in, put the layers in the order that they appear from bottom to top. So which one is the bottom? If you look at this picture, which layer is the lowest layer?
No, P.
P. It's P because you had S was over P and M was over S. And so the 3 that are on the bottom, P is the ultimate bottom one. So you should put P right here. Right. Okay, let me choose a different color so you can see it. P.
What are these for?
Huh? These are for writing out your results from, huh? What is that?
It handed me these 2 things.
Oh, it should have been, this was here, this here, Nathan's. Should have been just that sheet. So that I don't do that one, so here's another one.
Here, you gave us an extra one.
Okay. I'm very dexterous. Okay, so I put P in there because that's the lowest layer. And then I'm going to put in the next one, the next lowest layer. What's the next lowest layer? Okay, so the next one's S. And then you put in all the rest of the layers in the order that they appear after you've made all of those connections. And then in this column, indicate where each one of these is. So like in column 1, what's the lowest item in column 1?
M.
And so M, I'll just put the M is going to be here in the next one. And so I'm going to put 1 here for region 1 because that was the first item. Which order was it in column 2? So I'm going to put a 2 here. And in column 3? And column 4? None. So I leave it blank.
Okay, so then it goes 1, 2, 3, like it goes 1 up.
Yeah, so you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as you go up. And the last one goes up to 6. So the first 3 columns only go up to 5. The last one goes up to 6. And so you're going to have the number. So you'll have, like, for region 2, where does P come in region 2? Like, I haven't gotten to that portion yet. Okay, so it's not in there, so we'll leave it blank. Where does S come? In region 2, where does S come? Okay, so you understand the pattern of how you put the numbers in. Okay, then we get to what Bryson was talking about. Identifying the actual time periods for these. So notice we have fossils. We have here a trilobite and a brachiopod. Or is that brachiopod? I think it is. Yep, brachiopod. And here we have a brachiopod and a gastropod. And here we have a coral and a sea scorpion. And here we have a fish and a coral. And here we have a fish. So what?
Label all of these?
No, I actually labeled them so I don't get confused. Especially the copy is so horrible. What is this?
Reptile. Oh,
Okay.
there.
That's, yeah, it calls it reptile, so I'm going to put R for reptile. What is this?
Oh, that's a
Scorpion.
mollusk.
Oh, no,
It's the coral.
coral.
What is this?
Fish.
I come back here. Yes, it's a fish. That's why I'm putting those, because it's hard to tell what they are. What is this here?
A
Mollusk.
Yes. It's a brachiopod. Well, this here must be a trilobite here. And this here is going to be another brachiopod. And trying to remember, well, if we look at the other L, over here it's clear, so that's going to be the gastropod. Or I could have looked there. So identify what these are if you can't tell, because something went horribly wrong with the copying. And I assume your books are just as bad as mine was, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm putting those in. So now what we're going to do is say, okay, which regions have trilobites? So if I look here, I have trilobite in M and in S. There's a trilobite there. There's a trilobite there. I think that's a trilobite there that you can't see. So I had trilobites in M and S. So M and S are going to have to be Ordovician or Cambrian. One could be Cambrian, one could be Ordovician. At this point, I don't have enough information to know. So then I go to the next one, stromatolite. What do you notice about the stromatolite time period?
It covers everyone.
It covers everything. That means it's not going to help us. So you don't need to worry about the stromatolites at all. This is here for an actually good purpose. Stromatolites are still forming today. So those are things that are still in existence that were existence back here in the Paleozoic. The brachiopods. Brachiopods can appear in everything except for Cambrian. So anything that has a brachiopod I know is not Cambrian. So where do we find the brachiopods? We found them in L and M. Now we have enough information to make a call, because trilobites appeared in M and S and brachiopods appeared in M and L. So I had M in both of these, which means M has to be one of these two and one of these.
So N is Ordovician.
So the only thing that overlaps is Ordovician. And so now I can come over here, and in the first column, I'm going to put Ordovician, because I've positively identified which period that is from. So you're going to go through and do the same work for the rest of them. And so over here, when you're done, you will have the names of the periods for each one of these layers. And there will be some periods that have more than one layer in them. Don't say, oh, I've already got with that one, so it must be something else. There are also three layers. Could be from two periods. That is, it could be from, for instance, there's one that could be Silurian or Ordovician. And so in the case where you have it could be in more than one, look for exclusionary fossils, fossils that aren't there that could be there. And so if I have, for instance, let us suppose that I had something that had brachiopods and gastropods. Brachiopods and gastropods.
L.
Does L have? Yes, it does. Okay. So that's a real example then that I so Ordovician or Silurian. Well, if it was Ordovician, you would expect you could have had trilobites. If it was Silurian, you would expect that it could have sea scorpions or corals. And so use that to try to narrow down which one you think it might be. Or if you have it's below, something else that's already Ordovician, then it would have to be Ordovician. If it's above something that's already Silurian, it would have to be Silurian. So use other cues to try to place those. So you should be able to get all of these, but recognize which ones could be in two categories based on the fossils that are in them, because you have a question on that. What?
How do you, so before when you wrote like that M in the Ordovician,
I said M was Ordovician because M.
no, I know, I'm saying when you wrote it in these lines here, you erased it, but before you wrote it in the lines, you said it could be here, 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 here.
It could be anywhere where this arrow was because it had trilobites, and anywhere where this arrow was because it had brachiopods. And so I just written M beside the line in every step.
So technically, L has to be just one of these two, Silurian or Ordovician.
Well, there's always the possibility that it could be right on this line too. Right, it could be spanning them. But use exclusion, looking at the other things and what it's missing to try identify. But you have questions now that you're going to answer. We're done with all the work except for answering the questions. List the missing rock layers for each region. You can do that one before you even start because you have, this one has MLDZX, doesn't have B, doesn't have C, doesn't have D. Oh, wait, no, it has D.
So you would say in region 1, it's missing blah, blah. In
That-
region 2, it's missing blah, blah.
Yes, that's right. And so the way I wrote it in is I just put 1, blah, 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 blah. 2, blah, 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 blah. 3, blah, blah, blah. 4, blah, 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 blah. And of course, it's actually going to be 4 for each except for the last one with 3 because of the number of items in each column. So you're just listing the layers that are missing. So as soon as you determine what all the layers are, then you can say which ones are missing. Question 2, the appearance of identical fossils in each of the sections facilitates the correlation of rock layers between outcrops. The reptile in 3 outcrops is not present in region 1. So if we look at that reptile, you can see the R's in 3 regions. They're all in B. There is no region B and there's no reptile in region 1. So that's what your question is asking you about. Number 3.
B is Permian.
Okay, the reptile only exists in Permian, so that's going to have to be the case. Right? If you look in the diagram here, the reptile is only in Permian. Our particular fish fossil, right? There's more than one fish fossil, and this is supposed to be just one. Is found in layers Z and X and has a time range expanding from Devonian to the Permian. How can we assign a specific time to X when the fish could be in those 3 regions? So you give your answer there. There are several rock layers. There are 3 layers that you're going to list here. So name these layers, so name those 3, and then explain how you could have fossils extending for more than one time period be found in one rock layer. Finally, there are many different types of fossils in our hypothetical rock layers. What the majority of these have in common? And it says, hint, think habitat and environment. So think about where trilobites lived, where stromatolites are formed, where brachiopods lived, where sea scorpions, coral, fish. So answer your question based on those. That's all. We should be done long before our lab period ends.